Right now, somewhere in the Pacific Ocean, a US aircraft carrier is cutting through the waves, and it is carrying enough firepower to end a war before breakfast. 7 weapons, each one more terrifying than the last, and every single one of them is operational right now, hidden in plain sight aboard America's most powerful warships. If you think the US still has the most lethal navy on the planet, type "ready" in the comments below, because what you're about to see is going to prove it. Weapon number 1, RIM-116B. Let's start with the weapon that rewrote the rulebook on air-to-air combat. It's called the AIM-174B. The Navy calls it the Gunslinger, and that name is earned. For decades, the fundamental challenge facing carrier-based fighters was reach. China developed long-range missiles like the PL-15 specifically to keep American jets at arm's length, to force them to engage at distances where China's numbers advantage would matter. The PL-15 reaches out to around 120 miles. That's far enough that Chinese jets could launch and run before an American pilot could respond. The Gunslinger doesn't just close that gap, it obliterates it. The AIM-174B is based on the SM-6, a ship-launched missile that has been protecting Navy destroyers for years. Engineers stripped out the booster, redesigned the aerodynamics, and created a version that fits under the wing of an F/A-18 Super Hornet. The result is an air-to-air missile with a range of over 300 miles. That's more than double the PL-15. It's 3 times the range of the missiles American jets have been flying with for the last 20 years. But range is only part of the story. The AIM-174B flies at Mach 3.5, that's 2,600 miles per hour. By the time an enemy radar operator detects an incoming gunslinger, there is almost nothing they can do about it. The missile carries a 140-pound warhead, 3 times the explosive power of a standard air-to-air missile. And it isn't limited to aircraft. The gunslinger can hit ships, it can hit ground targets. And the Navy is already testing a version capable of intercepting hypersonic missiles. Here's why this changes everything. China's entire anti-access strategy, the doctrine they've been building for 20 years, depends on pushing American carriers away from Taiwan and the South China Sea. To do that, they need their early warning aircraft and surveillance planes to stay operational. Those aircraft coordinate China's fighters. They see everything. Without them, Chinese air operations fall apart. The Gunslinger can reach those aircraft before China's fighters can get close enough to stop it. 1 Super Hornet, 1 missile, and China's eyes in the sky go dark. The weapon made its public debut at the RIM-116 exercises in July 2024. Photos showed Super Hornets from the USS Carl Vinson carrying 2 of these massive missiles, aircraft that are right now stationed just a few hundred miles from the Taiwan Strait. This isn't a prototype, this isn't a test program. The Gunslinger is operational, and it has fundamentally shifted what it means to fight in the Pacific. Weapon number 2. EA-18G Growler. Most people have never heard of the EA-18G Growler. That's exactly the point. While everyone focuses on fighters and missiles, the Growler does something far more unsettling. It doesn't shoot down enemy aircraft. It makes enemy aircraft and enemy missiles, radars, and communication systems stop working entirely. The EA-18G is an electronic warfare variant of the Super Hornet. From the outside, it looks almost identical to a standard fighter jet, but instead of air-to-air missiles and bombs, its weapons pylons carry AN/ALQ, 99 jamming pods, and, increasingly, the newer, more capable next-generation jammer. These systems can emit focused electromagnetic energy powerful enough to blind enemy radar installations from over 100 miles away. Think about what that means in practice. An enemy ship launches a surface-to-air missile at an American strike package. That missile relies on radar to track its target. The Growler, flying at a safe distance, floods that radar frequency with interference. The missile loses its lock. It flies blind. It misses. An enemy ground installation tries to coordinate its air defense network. The Growler kills the communications link. The radar operators can't talk to the fighters. The fighters can't talk to the command center. In seconds, a coordinated air defense system becomes a collection of confused, isolated operators staring at static. And here's what makes it truly devastating. The Growler can do all of this while simultaneously shooting back. It carries the AGM-88 HARM, a missile specifically designed to home in on radar emissions. When an enemy radar switches on to try to find an American strike package, the Growler fires a HARM. The missile follows the radar signal straight to the source and destroys it. The radar operator faces an impossible choice: stay blind and turn off the radar, or turn it on and die. Every carrier air wing currently deploys with a squadron of Growlers. They fly ahead of every strike package. They go in first, they clear the electromagnetic battlefield, and they make it possible for the F-35s and Super Hornets behind them to do their jobs with dramatically reduced risk. Russia and China have invested enormous resources in advanced air defense systems. The S-400, the HQ-9, the S-500, these systems are formidable on paper, but every single one of them depends on radar. And radar is exactly what the Growler was built to destroy. This is a weapon that wins wars before a single bomb is dropped, and almost no one is talking about it. Weapon number 3, F-35C Lightning. 2 with LRASM. Now let's talk about stealth and what it can carry. The F-35C is the carrier variant of the F-35 Lightning II. It has larger wings than its land-based siblings, reinforced landing gear for the brutality of carrier landings, and a tailhook strong enough to survive thousands of arrested recoveries. But what separates it from every other aircraft on Earth isn't its airframe, it's its ability to disappear. The F-35C has a radar cross-section roughly equivalent to a metal golf ball. To an enemy radar operator, it simply doesn't exist. And an aircraft that doesn't exist can fly anywhere. But here's where it gets serious. In 2025, the Navy completed integration of the AGM-158 CLRASM, the long-range anti-ship missile, onto the F-35C. This is a stealthy cruise missile with a range of over 200 miles, and it is specifically designed to sink enemy warships. The LCLRASM doesn't need GPS to find its target. It uses an onboard infrared sensor suite and an AI-driven targeting computer that can identify and prioritize enemy ships, even in the middle of heavy electronic jamming. It flies at low altitude to avoid radar detection, it maneuvers to avoid defensive fire, and then it picks the most vulnerable spot on the target ship and hits it there. A single F-35C can carry 2 LRASMs externally, or fit them inside its internal weapons bay when stealth is the priority. An enemy ship never sees the jet. In many cases, it never sees the missile until impact. The USS George Washington demonstrated this combination during the Talisman Sabre exercises in July 2025. The first time an F-35C carrying LRASM was used in a live military exercise. Allies from Australia, the UK and Japan watched American jets hunt and kill simulated surface targets without ever being detected. The message to every adversary watching was clear. But the F-35C isn't just a strike aircraft, it's a flying intelligence platform. Its AN/APG-81 radar and distributed aperture system can detect enemy aircraft and ships at ranges that rival dedicated surveillance aircraft. And it can beam that targeting data to other fighters, to destroyers, to missiles already in flight. Every F-35C in the air makes every other aircraft and ship in the strike group more lethal. China's J-20 is their answer to the F-35, but the J-20 has never been tested in real combat. The F-35C is operational right now on the USS Carl Vinson, the USS Abraham Lincoln, and the USS George Washington. When it comes to stealth and strike, there is no comparison. Before we continue, if you're finding this valuable, hit that like button and subscribe. We cover the weapons, the people, and the strategy that keep America ahead of its enemies. Over 98% of viewers watch without subscribing. It costs you nothing. Let's keep going. Weapon number 4, MQ-25 Stingray. This next weapon doesn't fire a single bullet, and it might be the most strategically important one on this list. The MQ-25 Stingray is the US Navy's first operational carrier-based unmanned aircraft. It looks at first glance like a relatively simple drone. A flying wing design, no cockpit, no weapons visible. What it carries instead of bombs is fuel, and lots of it. The Stingray is an aerial refueling platform. It flies out from the carrier, meets up with F-35s and Super Hornets operating hundreds of miles away, and transfers fuel that allows those jets to stay in the fight far longer than they could on their own. One Stingray can extend the combat radius of a carrier air wing by hundreds of miles. That might not sound like a weapon, but in naval warfare, range is everything. Here's the strategic picture. Without the Stingray, an FA-18 Super Hornet has a combat radius of roughly 450 miles from the carrier. That's how close the carrier has to get to a potential target. And in an era of Chinese and Russian long-range anti-ship missiles, closing to within 450 miles means putting a $13 billion ship in significant danger. With the Stingray, that combat radius stretches dramatically. The carrier can stay further back behind the defensive umbrella of its escort ships, while its aircraft still reach the fight. The Stingray doesn't just refuel jets, it keeps the carrier itself safer by allowing it to operate from greater distances. But the implications go further. The Stingray's airframe is designed to eventually carry sensors and signals intelligence equipment. Future versions could operate as decoys, drawing enemy fire. They could carry electronic warfare pods. They could scout ahead of a strike package, feeding targeting data back to the pilots behind them. Boeing delivered the first production MQ-25s in 2024, and carrier integration testing is now complete. This isn't a concept. The Stingray is joining the fleet, and it is going to redefine how carrier air wings fight for the next 30 years. America's enemies have spent 2 decades trying to push US carriers out of range. The Stingray just made that strategy obsolete. Weapon number 5. RIM-116 Rolling Airframe Missile. Everything we've talked about so far is about reaching out and hitting the enemy. But what happens when the enemy hits back? A modern anti-ship missile can travel at Mach 2 or faster. It hugs the surface of the ocean to avoid radar. It can maneuver in the final seconds before impact. And a single hit on a carrier can kill dozens of sailors and put the ship out of action for months. The RIM-116 Rolling Airframe Missile, the RAM, is the carrier's answer to that threat. Every US aircraft carrier carries at least 2 Mk-49 launchers, each loaded with 21 RAM missiles. These are small weapons by naval standards. They're fast, lightweight, and they work in a way that nothing else in the American arsenal does. The RAM uses a dual-mode guidance system that is specifically designed to defeat the tricks modern anti-ship missiles use to survive. In the first phase of engagement, the RAM locks onto the radar emissions coming from an incoming missile. Most anti-ship missiles use radar to track their target. They emit a signal. The RAM homes in on that signal like a heat-seeking missile homes in on an engine. The incoming missile essentially guides the RAM straight to itself. Then, in the final seconds before impact, the RAM switches to infrared guidance. So even if the enemy missile goes silent, even if it turns off its radar seeker to try to break the lock, the RAM is already close enough to track its heat signature. There's no escape. And here's the engineering detail that gives it its name. The missile rolls continuously as it flies. That rolling motion, like a rifle bullet, stabilizes its flight path and allows it to use a simpler, lighter guidance system than it would otherwise need. The result is a missile that is cheaper to build, faster to launch, and incredibly reliable. In recent operations in the Red Sea, RAM systems aboard Navy ships successfully intercepted multiple Houthi cruise missiles and drones. These weren't training exercises, these were real incoming weapons, and the RAM stopped them cold. Carriers also carry the Phalanx close-in weapon system as a final backstop, a radar-guided 20mm gatling gun that fires 4,500 rounds per minute and can shred a cruise missile in the last few hundred feet of its approach. Together, the RAM and the Phalanx create a defensive envelope around the carrier that is extraordinarily difficult to penetrate. No enemy has ever sunk a US aircraft carrier in combat. Weapons like the RAM are a major reason why. Weapon number 6. Evolved Sea Sparrow Missile Block 2. The RAM handles the close-in threats, but what about the ones that haven't gotten close yet? That's the job of the Evolved Sea Sparrow Missile Block 2, the ESSM Block 2, and it is a weapon that doesn't get nearly enough credit. The ESSM Block 2 is a medium-range surface-to-air missile with an engagement range of around 30 miles. It's designed to kill cruise missiles, aircraft and drones that are still far enough out that the RAM hasn't engaged yet. Think of it as the second ring of the carrier's defensive bubble. After long-range escorts have taken their shots, the ESSM handles what gets through. What makes the Block 2 version so significant is its active radar guidance. Earlier versions of the Sea Sparrow needed the ship's own radar to track the target all the way to impact, meaning one radar could only guide one missile at a time. The Block 2 has its own onboard radar seeker. Once it's fired, it guides itself. The ship can fire multiple ESSM Block 2 missiles simultaneously at multiple different targets without overloading a single radar system. In a saturation attack, the strategy China and Russia would use, firing dozens of missiles simultaneously to overwhelm defenses, that distinction is everything. A point defense system that can only handle one threat at a time is a system that loses against a salvo of 30 incoming missiles. The ESSM Block 2 can engage multiple threats in parallel. Carriers are equipped with Mk-29 launchers positioned around the ship to provide 360-degree coverage. The Block 2 can engage targets flying at high altitude. It can drop down to intercept sea-skimming missiles flying just feet above the ocean surface, the exact flight profile that modern Russian and Chinese anti-ship missiles use specifically to defeat radar detection. In live fire testing, the ESSM Block 2 has achieved a success rate approaching 97%. On a $13 billion warship with 5,000 sailors aboard, that reliability isn't just impressive, it's essential. And here's a detail that almost nobody mentions. The ESSM Block 2 is now standard across the entire NATO alliance. American carriers can share missile defense data in real time with allied ships. If a British destroyer detects an incoming missile, it can transmit that targeting solution to the American carrier, which fires an ESSM that's already on its way before the threat even clears the horizon. No other navy in the world has that level of integrated, multinational, real-time air defense capability. Not China, not Russia, nobody. Weapon number 7. FA-18EF Super Hornet Block 3. We end with the workhorse, the weapon that ties everything else together, the aircraft that has been doing the heaviest lifting in carrier aviation for over 2 decades, and has just gotten dramatically more dangerous. The FA-18EF Super Hornet Block 3 is not the same jet that rolled off the production line in the late 1990s. The airframe is similar. Everything inside it has been rebuilt for a new era of warfare. The Block 3 upgrade brings a new advanced cockpit system, a single massive touchscreen display that replaces the cluster of older gauges and screens. It brings an upgraded AN/APG-79V4 radar with active electronically scanned array technology, dramatically improving its ability to track targets in cluttered, electronically jammed environments. It brings conformal fuel tanks that increase range without adding drag, and it brings a reduced radar cross-section. Not stealth like the F-35C, but meaningfully harder to detect than earlier Super Hornets. But the real story is the weapons it carries. In addition to the AIM-174B gunslinger we covered earlier, the Block 3 Super Hornet carries the AIM-120D AMRAAM, a beyond visual range missile with a range of over 100 miles and a data link that allows it to receive targeting updates while in flight. The missile can be redirected mid-course if the target maneuvers. It can be retasked to a different target entirely after launch. An enemy pilot who thinks they've defeated an AMRAAM by maneuvering hard may find that the missile has simply adjusted. The Block 3 also carries the AIM-9X Sidewinder, the most maneuverable short-range air-to-air missile ever built. The 9X can engage targets at angles that defy physics. It can be fired at an aircraft that's actually behind the launching jet, using helmet-mounted cueing to designate a target the pilot is simply looking at. The missile turns, acquires the target, and kills it, without the pilot ever having to point the nose of the aircraft anywhere near the threat. And for strike missions, the Super Hornet carries the AGM-154 Joint Standoff Weapon, and increasingly, the Joint Strike Missile, a stealthy cruise missile with a range of over 180 miles capable of hitting ships and hardened ground targets. The Super Hornet's true power, though, is its flexibility. No other aircraft on Earth does as many different things at a professional level. Air-to-air combat, precision ground strike, aerial refueling SAMSOS. Some Block 3s are configured as tankers, extending the range of F-35s and other Super Hornets by thousands of miles, suppression of enemy air defences alongside the Growler, maritime strike with the LRASM, intelligence and reconnaissance with advanced sensor pods. During operations in the Red Sea in 2024 and 2025, Super Hornets from the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower flew over 15,000 combat hours. They shot down Houthi drones, they struck ground targets, they provided combat air patrol for Allied ships in some of the most contested airspace on the planet. Not a single aircraft was lost. That is not luck. That is what 2 decades of continuous combat experience produces. That is what the most capable naval aviation training program on Earth looks like in action. The Navy plans to fly upgraded Block 3 Super Hornets well into the 2040s. And with new electronic warfare pods, extended range fuel systems, and full integration with the MQ-25 Stingray already in testing, the Super Hornet is going to keep getting better for years to come. China wants to replace the carrier. Russia wants to sink it. Neither of them has figured out how to stop what's flying off its deck. 7 weapons, each one a different layer of the most sophisticated combat system ever placed on a ship. The RIM-116 gunslinger, reaching out 300 miles to kill threats before they're even close. The EA-18G Growler, blinding enemy radars and turning advanced air defense networks into expensive paperweights. The F-35C Lightning II, invisible and lethal, carrying anti-ship missiles that sink enemy warships without warning. The MQ-25 Stingray, rewriting the rules of range and quietly making the carrier safer by keeping it farther from harm. The RIM-116 Rolling Airframe Missile, a last-ditch defender that has stopped real incoming weapons in real combat. The ESSM Block 2, holding the middle ring of the defensive bubble with 97% reliability across 30 miles of ocean. And the FA-18EF Super Hornet Block 3, versatile, proven, combat-hardened, and quietly becoming more dangerous with every upgrade cycle. These aren't weapons in a museum. They're not prototypes in a lab. They are loaded, operational, and deployed right now, said on carriers moving through the Pacific, the Mediterranean, and the Red Sea. China is building carriers, Russia is threatening. But building a carrier is the easy part. What they can't replicate in a decade, maybe 2, is the integration, the doctrine, the training, the decades of hard-won experience that allows 5,000 sailors and pilots to operate all of these systems simultaneously, under pressure, in combat, and get it right. That is what makes a US aircraft carrier the most powerful weapon on Earth. Not any single system on this list. All of them, together, operated by the most capable naval force in human history. If this changed the way you think about American sea power, hit that like button and subscribe for more. We're here to tell the stories behind the hardware, the weapons, the people, and the strategy that keep America ahead. Stay proud, stay informed.